I like to say Obama got me out of the military and public service, and Biden got me back in. My family home got shot at in my first race after my opponent did an ad, actually filmed an ad at my house. I mean, that bullet hit my family home 20 feet away from my kids were sleeping. What bringing the National Guard in can do is actually free up the CMPD to do what they do best.
Welcome on into another edition of Tying Together with Tim Boehm. I'm Tim Boehm here with John McHugh. And John, we've got a big guest this week, literally. 6'7". Yeah, it's a pretty tall guy.
That's pretty tall. That's almost a foot taller than me.
Yeah,
so that's something.
I've only met him in person once, but he towers over me. We're talking about Pat Harrigan. He's a congressman from the 10th district in North Carolina. And John, we are going to talk some policy stuff and some heavy stuff, frankly, with crime and sort of the climate out there. But his background is fascinating.
It's so interesting. Yeah. You hear. There are a lot of former military in Congress and, various different roles in the military. This is far and away one of the more interesting backgrounds in that realm that we have.
I have some military in my background, but not a lot. Like my family. My dad was in the Navy, but so I am fascinated by, he's in special forces. Like I can't even comprehend what people are about to hear about what they go through. Do you have a lot of military at all in your family or?
Not a ton. Just my dad's father was in the Navy, but aside from that, I have friends who were in the military.
Yeah.
But yeah, not a ton of my family.
Yeah. So we got special forces. He was born in San Diego, but also spent time in rural Wyoming. So we ask him about that, of course. He represents the 10th district. He replaced Patrick McHenry, who retired. And he went to Ranger School. He went to West Point. Talks a lot about that. A degree in nuclear engineering. So we'll ask him about that, what he thought he was going to do it. So just a pretty fascinating conversation. Here is Pat Harrigan. First of all, it's great to have you on. We've talked to you on TV a bunch, but your background is so fascinating that I wanted to talk to you, not only about politics, but about your background too. One of my favorite interesting things on your website was that you were born in San Diego, but split your time between San Diego and small town Wyoming. Those are two very different places. What's going on there?
They're very, very different places. My father grew up in western Wyoming, and his father, so my grandfather, was county clerk out there of the largest county by landmass, Sweetwater County, for almost 40 years. And so Wyoming's always, kind of been near and dear place to our family's hearts. And so growing up, although I went to school and played sports down in San Diego, I got to spend all summer and usually about a month and a half across the winter months in a couple different spurts up there in Wyoming. And so I like to say, I got all the kind of best experiences of the big city, but I got my values and my perspectives out of Wyoming.
That's really neat. Two very different places. I know I've met you a few times in person. You're a tall guy. Sports. So was it basketball? What were your sports?
I played it all. I played basketball, baseball, football, tennis, a little bit of everything.
And so where did the idea to go to West Point and do the military come in? Obviously, that's an extraordinary, difficult path. Where did that all come from?
Well, I had my grandfather on my mother's side. He was actually a World War II veteran, had been drafted and started as a private. He was in both D-Day and the Battle of the Bulge. And by the time that he was done with his time in service, he was actually a first lieutenant and had kind of matriculated up through the officer corps as by attrition, really. I mean, he'd been in some really, really tough stuff, and he was always a great mentor of mine. And it never ever left me, Tim, that he could never remember towards the end of his life, what he ate for breakfast, but he could give me a play-by-play of D-Day.
Wow.
Or, day 2 of the Battle of the Bulge, whatever it might be. And it made such an impression on my perspective of not only what I wanted to do with my life, but also the impact that he had, not only for the country, but the future trajectory of the world, right? Like he helped earn this massive peace dividend that the calling of World War II created. And as terrible as that experience was, it was an experience that shaped the rest of his life. And I really wanted the same thing.
For those of us that have not been to West Point, we have this like image of it. So for you, you've been there. What was it like?
It's like a prison. They say, Tim, West Point is a great place to be from, not a great place to be. But in all seriousness, some of that's true. It is also an unbelievable institution, and it is an incredible asset for this country. All of our service academies are. They truly produce the highest quality leader in the world. And it has just provided me such perspective and such opportunity that I couldn't even imagine having my life without that experience at West Point. It's just been so enriching from both an educational perspective, a professional development perspective, but certainly from a leadership perspective. And then what we were able to do with that as I actually served 7.5 years active duty, ultimately in the Special Forces. It's just an unbelievable place that generates unbelievable outcomes for the future of this country.
So what was it, the rigidness or the physical regime that you had? I mean, what was so tough that people joke it's like prison?
I think it's the full package of everything, right? Number one, you go there and, the style is very much 1800s, right? And so very, very traditional, brick, block, big, huge slabs of granite everywhere. And so it kind of looks like a prison. That being said, again, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Anybody that wants to do something for a higher purpose than just kind of their own personal and professional development has got to seriously consider the service academies, whatever service academy they might be really kind of drawn towards. Because as the history department at all the service academies say, the history we teach is made by the students we taught.
So we'll get into your military career in a minute, but you graduated nuclear engineering, is that right?
Well, Tim, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life when I grew up, but I figured that if I got a degree in nuclear engineering, that once I figured out what I wanted to do in my life, nobody would tell me that I'm too stupid to do it. And largely, that's played out.
And does it work?
It was a roll of the dice gamble.
Does it help for Congress? That sounds like an incredible. That's like you want to be an astronaut or something, or like a physicist or something. What do you do with nuclear engineering? I mean, besides going to Congress with that kind of degree?
Well, I'll tell you what I did do is I had a lot of late nights because there was only 7 people in our major, and I should have taken that as a cue that this was going to be very hard. I was 7 out of 7 in the major, and although I clearly learned I was not going to be the guy that was going to make the next breakthrough in nuclear weapons or nuclear power, I was the only one out of the 7 that could actually communicate what the other 6 were doing to regular people. And so I think there's always been a market there, right? For distilling the very complex and complicated. And I love theoretical physics. I'm a math guy. There's so much beauty in it. So I thoroughly enjoyed the study. It was a very diverse course of study, but I never ended up actually doing anything with it until I got to Congress, which is kind of the funny part of this, Tim, because there's no other nuclear engineer up there. And this, our entire country is moving towards nuclear power. Whether it's fission, whether it's fusion, whether it's small modular reactors, whether it's micro reactors that are actually going to be deployable for our nation's military, nobody can really talk to that. And I've been able to step right into that and provide, I've been blessed enough to be able to step in and provide leadership in this space for where our country is going to go. And it's a really, really exciting time to be involved in nuclear.
Yeah, to me, one of the most under talked about potential issues is energy infrastructure with all this AI, right? Like, I mean, that is a huge conundrum for this country moving forward, right?
It's the ball game, right? I mean, if you look at the 4 strategic advantages that we have over all the world, we are able to produce an unbelievable amount of food, and we are able to give it ubiquitously to our people at a very low price. We have effectively the same thing for energy. We have the world's most powerful military. And we have a decisive advantage in the generation of artificial intelligence. All 4 of those things we have to sustain if we want to remain the world's foremost superpower. And 2 of those are directly aligned with nuclear power. One is cheap and ubiquitous access to power. The other is artificial intelligence. Those things are absolutely attached at the hip. Taking 2 of the 4 most critical facets of our society, it's undeniable how powerful nuclear is going to be in the next market economy as well as for our nation's defense.
So in another world, did you think about doing something in that field, or was it always the next step to go into the military? Or in another world, are you doing something with this professionally?
Yeah, in another world, I probably would be right now, just because I think people are waking up to the concept of, hey, we have put nuclear power off to the side, and really, and this is kind of where I just take issue with our overall national stance prior to the Trump administration with respect to energy generation, right? Nobody looks at history, but we've got to learn from history because history informs us of the way things went in the past and the way things will go in the future. There's nothing new under the sun, right? Take a very ecclesiastical perspective to life. And energy generation has never been subtractive in the history of mankind. It's always additive. We always need more. And so there's no bad type of energy. We just have to understand from a baseline perspective, we are always going to consume more and more energy. People thought peak coal was 1963. Well, guess what? The world's using 3 times as much coal today as they were in 1963. We're still using coal as a methodology of power generation, not so much in our country as other developing countries are, but we are still consuming as a globe far, far, far more energy today than we were in 1963. And we're going to consume far more energy in 2040 than we are here in 2025. So any other type of perspective on energy utilization not only harms the future of our market economy, it harms our national security. And so nuclear is a critical core component of our future power generation capacity.
Do you think that, because a lot of conservatives like to rag on a lot of renewables, whether it's solar or wind, do you think, though, it should be an all hands on deck? Now, you can have a debate about government involvement and all that, but we need every bit of energy we can get no matter where it comes from, right?
Yes, I agree with that statement. And look, we need an all of the above energy strategy if we're going to properly prepare for, again, the future of our market economy and the future of our national defense. I do think it is very valid to have those discussions about government subsidies. And I do think that if these energy modalities cannot stand on their own 2 feet, you've got to have a very hard economic discussion and a set of decisions that follow that, because we've got to turn a profit here in our society, right? Currently, we're not. At the end of the day, yes, the private sector is. The public sector, we're $2.2 trillion deficit every single year. We've got to start paying attention to that, or that starts to erode into our future development potential as a country. And so I think that those discussions are warranted. But in general, if any strategy for energy production can stand on its own 2 feet, I love it. I'm all about it.
All right, so let's go back to your military career then. Was this always, when did it click to you? You said, I want to do this with the rest of my life, or the next part of my life?
No kidding. It was actually when I drove through the gates of West Point. It was not a very specific trip that we were going on. My parents were kind of taking me on a Northeast college tour. And because of my grandfather's influence, and I had just also come to Christ at that point in time in my life, I felt this calling like, hey, go check this out. You may hate it. You may love it. And when I went through those gates, I was like, man, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And not everything was great about it. It was really a fairly terrible experience all the way through. But on the level of terrible experiences with respect to going through Ranger School or going through the Special Forces assessment and selection or the qualification course, or then ultimately serving in combat, what an incredible preparatory trajectory that institution puts you on. And you realize at the end of the day that it's really the beginning of the discipline and the suffering that you really have to go through in order to make the changes that are required for us to continue to lead the free world and to have the quality of life that we have in this country. It's something that's very special. It's not common around the world. We've done something very special here, and it's worth continuing to protect and perpetuate.
All right, so how hard is Ranger School, right? Is the physical aspect the hardest, or?
It's a fairly short duration of incredibly high intensity training. And so it's only 62 days long. I lost 37 pounds, and I'm the type of a guy that has a build that I don't have 37 pounds to lose. And so, as I'm going through this course, I'm literally smelling my skin, and it smells like ammonia because I'm burning off, just the dregs of what I have left because I got nothing left in me. I'm falling asleep while walking. It's an incredibly challenging course that sets you up to be the premier infantryman in the world. And then after that, deciding, after a deployment to Afghanistan that I wanted to actually go into the Special Forces, felt called to go in that direction. You end up in Special Forces assessment and selection, which is a whole nother ball game. 3 weeks, even higher intensity. But then you end up in the 2-year long Q course, and people kind of take that for granted too, because although the intensity is not high, the intensity is over a long duration of your life, 2 years long. And so they all present their own challenges in their own unique ways, and I think collectively played a very significant role in shaping who I am today, the perspective that I have, that tenacity, that just bottom line, like I'm never going to quit. Doesn't matter what you throw at me. I might not be the best at it, but you are never, ever going to get me to stop.
Like the Special Forces training in particular, they try to get you to the point where you want to say you want to quit, right? Because they want somebody that won't say it at that point. I mean, does it get that hard? Like, I mean, can you remember almost getting to the line of like, I don't know if I can do this much more?
Yeah, daily. You're constantly fighting with yourself, right? Like nobody goes through that and says, this was easy, right? And I talked to my SEAL buddies, talked to guys that, went into Delta Force or SEAL Team 6, and like everybody's got, similar circumstances. And the only thing that changes is how long, how far, and for how long you're going to do it, right? As you continue to kind of climb up the ladder. But the overall impact is the same, and the lesson is the same. Don't ever quit. And you want to find that out in training about somebody. You do not want to find that out in combat.
Now,
that's the whole purpose of it.
Do you have certain things you can't talk about regarding Special Forces? Because I remember when I first moved here, we went down to Fort Bragg and toured around as part of the station. We asked about Delta Special Forces, and I swear I remember them saying, like, we don't know what you're talking about. Like it was like the secretive thing of it. Do you have that? Is that a thing?
Yeah, some of it falls into that category, but I'm well versed enough at this point. I know where to go, where not to go. But we won't have to kill you if we tell you on the things we're going to talk about on this podcast.
Okay, phew. Do you remember physically what was the hardest moment of like Special Forces training though, that you can talk about?
Yes. So we had about a 4-hour long, just what we call a smoke session, right? And it's just when the instructors are just trying to weed people out. They're like, okay, we got to cut down some numbers here, and we're just going to go until people start quitting. And I got stuck doing these telephone pole rolls. So you literally take like a massive telephone pole, and you're like picking it up off the ground and curling it, and then putting it back down on the ground. And so it's just like a constant state of deadlifting a telephone pole with a bunch of other people. And I got stuck because as you talked about, Tim, I'm a big guy. So I'm 6'7". I got stuck with a bunch of really short guys. And so it got to the point where it was like excruciatingly painful for me to continue picking up this telephone pole. I was, using my back, trying to keep with the same level from everybody else. And, one of the sergeant major actually in charge of the course, because I had some serious pain. And so I was vocalizing that pain, and he came over and he whispered in my ear and he said, "One more peep out of you and you're gone."
Wow.
And I got the message. And, hey, you just got to suffer in silence, suck it up. This isn't going to last forever. However long it takes, it's something that you can endure. And that was one of the greatest lessons that anybody ever gave me, because he was exactly right. I was distracting from the overall objective of what the team needed to accomplish. And I was taking away from them, not adding to them, as I should as an officer and a leader. And so very, very grateful to him for that.
That's crazy. Is it hard to be your kid then based on what you went through and discipline?
So one of the incredible fascinations of the special operations community is that 80% of special operators, doesn't matter what branch, doesn't matter what they did, they only have girls as kids. And they've studied this. We have no idea why. DoD has put actually quite a bit of money into trying to figure it out. And they call it the Special Forces curse. Now, I don't think it's a curse. I think it's been a huge blessing. I think it mellows us out. Maybe God's trying to get even with us.
So you're a softie is what you're telling me now.
Yeah, 100%. Like we need that soft element of our lives, or we probably wouldn't keep it all together. But I have 2 girls, and I very much know where they're supposed to be, and their role in life and society is not the same role that I had. So I probably treat them way too soft, Tim, but they're incredible. They've got amazing character and personality. They're each completely different. One takes after me, the other takes after my wife. So they're really kind of the best of both of us in that way. It's been a real joy of my life to have them and to be responsible for growing them up in the way that they should go.
So I wonder the 20% that do have boys. I wonder if they're hard on them because they're boys. That'd be interesting.
I imagine that it is. And, one of the things that I think distinguished my wife and I from most other special operators is, number one, we only did 7.5 years in the military, right? We didn't do a career. And so very consciously, my wife and I chose, we're not going to have kids until I'm done deploying. I don't want to be an absentee father, don't want to be a dead dad, right? And so from that perspective, I think the children of special operators have an enormous sacrifice that they don't even understand. Vice the experience of other children who get to be around their parents, particularly their fathers, and have that steady rock nature that kids so desperately need. And so it's a very tough problem set for active duty special operators. It's something that I'm not jealous of that we didn't have to provide that to our children, but I'm very, very grateful for the special operators that do it because we need them. The country needs them, but it takes a tremendous toll on their families.
So your special forces, you went to Afghanistan, Green Beret, I mean, all this stuff, and you said 7.5 years. I feel like 10 is the point where you were almost at the point where you decided to career it or not. I'm assuming it kind of got to that point. So what made you go one way or the other?
So I was actually planning on doing a career, but I was a special operator in Afghanistan. My last deployment was in 2015 and 2016. And, that's really when Afghanistan started to go downhill, and you could see it. And very clearly, underneath the Obama administration, we had lost the political will to win. And we started making very political decisions from the president on down, all the way through our general officer corps, and not the right decisions for the men on the ground. And I just took that and I said, you know what? I think my time here is done. I've made the contribution that I feel like I'm obligated to make, but I don't want to fight under those circumstances where I have one or maybe even two hands tied behind my back. I'm just not willing to do that. I'm not willing to write notes home to the parents, the wives of my special operators that I couldn't tell them with a clear conscience that they died and we did everything we possibly could to accomplish the mission and keep them safe when we weren't doing that. And so and look, like, if we're not going to win, what's the point, Tim? And so I just decided, you know what? It's time to go. So the day that I got home from that deployment, I actually put in my packet to leave the military.
Wow.
And my wife and I already had a business on the side. And so, very, very fortunate, very blessed to be able to step right out of military service and that military income and have an income that was already greater than what I was having in the military. And so had the world's easiest transition. And then we kind of got into the manufacturing of things. And I've always loved making things. I've always loved employing people, leading people, and got to lead them in a different way.
And then you decide to run for Congress. What were you thinking?
Yeah. I like to say Obama got me out of the military and public service, and Biden got me back in. I had legitimately zero interest in politics after watching the confluence of military operations and politics in a really terrible way and experiencing that. I wanted nothing to do with politics for the rest of my life. And then when Afghanistan fell, I knew that was catastrophic for our country. And it wasn't just catastrophic because, okay, hey, we're out of Afghanistan. We lost Afghanistan. It was catastrophic because it sent a signal to our adversaries. And I genuinely believed that it condemned the next generation of Americans to conflict. And I think that conflict is playing out right now. I think that we have, unfortunately, are in the process of reaping what we have sowed through strategic weakness. And I think and believed at the time that I decided to run for Congress that was going to impact the quality of life that my kids were going to be able to have. It was going to impact the opportunity that we provided to the next generation of Americans. And I wasn't okay with that. We got this great business. We're moving along. We're continually growing. And I could take care of myself and my family very comfortably. But what's it all worth if the overall strategic power and impact that the United States is capable of making around the world, the greatest of which is keeping a foot on the throat of evil around the world? If I just allow this to happen, it's going to catch up with all of us, my family included, my two daughters included. I've got to do something about it. So we decided to run for Congress, and we became that, crazy dog chasing after the mail truck that ended up catching the mail truck. And sometimes I'm not sure whether I caught the truck or whether I caught the wheel. And I'm just spinning around that wheel well with all of this, especially during the shutdown, Tim. But nonetheless, hey, I did volunteer, raise my hand, and say, I think I can make a difference here. And I will tell you, I do feel like we've been making that difference, and it's an honor and a privilege to continue to serve.
Well, yeah, speaking of that, because you kind of considered the Senate run too, and how that worked out. Did you really want to run in that? Because I'd heard from some people that you'd even considered it after Whatley got in. I don't know if that's true or not, but is that something that you really were seriously considering?
Well, I definitely didn't consider it after Whatley got in. And look, you've got to understand, you got to step back. There are personal things that you're capable of doing, and then there's things that you should and shouldn't do. And when you kind of look back and you say, okay, hey, historically, we've only come in and the party that's in power across a sweep of government, right, House, Senate, and President, has only twice done well in a midterm election after that happened. And so we need to, as a team, collectively, we need to focus those resources into the general election, where we've got a very capable and proven opponent in Governor Cooper. But we need to not have that infighting within the Republican Party. I need to step back. Michael Whatley's the guy. And we need to do everything that we can to get him elected and focus those resources for him in the general and not in the primary. So from that perspective, look, as a member of a team, which special operators are also good at being, there was a no-brainer there.
I do want to talk about a few kind of issue topics here. It's difficult to talk about shutdown because as we speak, it's Monday. This is dropping Wednesday, and who knows what's going to happen. But I do want to talk about sort of the political volume that's out there. And you've been talking about this a lot, especially after Charlie Kirk. And even last week, you and Anderson Clayton, the Democratic Party chair, kind of went back and forth on Twitter. I see you laughing already. Basically, tell Pat Harrigan to shut the F up day. And you went back and forth with her. What do you think about that and sort of this climate that we're in right now?
I think her mama never washed her mouth out with soap like she should have. Look, I think Anderson is unfortunately embodying the wrong rhetoric that exists throughout the Democratic Party right now. And this is something that we've been talking about for some time. She is a leader within the Democratic Party, has a great opportunity to tone down the rhetoric, and instead she's just kind of constantly ratcheting it up, as are other leaders within the party. And that's gotten to the point for us where, look, it's become not only incredibly uncomfortable, but it is now almost cost the life of our president, and did cost the life of Charlie Kirk, excuse me, and almost just a couple of years before that, almost cost the life of Steve Scalise, right, as he was targeted during that baseball game. And so, I think very clearly we have a problem with rhetoric. It is very specifically from the political assassination side, coming from one side, one party, that's the Democratic Party. And I think we've all got to grow up, be the adults in the room, and that's got to stop. I mean, this has very real world impacts. I think most people in North Carolina are familiar with the fact, like, my family home got shot at in my first race after my opponent did an ad, actually filmed an ad at my house in my backyard, effectively, right? And like, that's just not smart. We don't live in a day and age where that's suitable, that's acceptable. And that rhetoric has just continued to increase, continued to ratchet up, continued to get worse. And so I think we all need to be adults. We need to be leaders, and we need to cast aside that type of rhetoric and say, look, At the end of the day, we are all Americans here. We cannot hate each other. We have to have political discourse and not political discord, because it's actually costing people their lives. It's putting their security in jeopardy. It's putting their family's security in jeopardy. I mean, that bullet hit my family home 20 feet away from my kids were sleeping. It's just gotten to a point where it's ridiculous. I'm used to getting shot at. I'm not used, and I'm not okay to having my family shot at. We've got to turn a corner here in this country.
There has been a lot of talk from on your side of the aisle that it's one-sided. The other side will say, look, the president is calling people enemies. In North Carolina, there was Mark Robinson saying there's, some people that need killing, and Michelle Morrow, the executions of Obama and Biden and whatnot. Do they make a point that this is a bipartisan problem?
I think you've got to look at the context in which they said those things. And I'm not defending it by any stretch of the imagination, but you also have to look at what outcomes does that incite. And, very clearly, I think we have a problem in the country. But when it comes to this very specific tool of political assassination, right, which is murder for a very political purpose, that does seem to be impacting only those at the highest echelons of the Republican Party. And so whatever the words that are being said, which may or may not be appropriate depending on the context that they're given, right? Like, hey, I don't have a problem saying that somebody on death row needs to die, right? I don't have a problem saying Charlie Kirk's shooter needs to get the death penalty. If that's the context of what we're talking about, I don't think that's the political rhetoric that is being discussed in this context. But that being said, I do think one side is paying a heavier price for this with respect to the animus of their base, turning that animus into actual physical violence. That is very specifically happening with the Democratic Party.
Speaking of violence, I talked to you on TV last week. You were down at the hearing in Charlotte for that field hearing for Congress. What do you think about these National Guards going into some of these communities? And do you think that they should consider putting the National Guard in Charlotte? I think you talked about last week where, at least for that young Ukrainian woman, that it was worse for her in Charlotte than Ukraine, which on the face of it kind of sounds wild, but I understand to some extent where you're coming from on that. So should they send the National Guard into a place like Charlotte?
Well, the Fraternal Order of Police last Friday put out a memo requesting both to Governor Josh Stein and to the President of the United States, President Trump, that they send the National Guard to Charlotte. And, I think that at the very least we should consider it. And here's the perspective from which I think we should consider it. Number one, I think clearly we've got constitutional guardrails that show that if you want to have National Guard operate with law enforcement authority, not protecting federal installations or federal offices or protecting federal operations within a city. If it goes beyond those authorities, then you've clearly got to have the cooperation of local, state, and federal decision makers. And so without that, no, I don't think that we should have that involvement. But I actually do think that we should consider it, because when you took a look at, and I know, Tim, you were there, right? Like that testimony was heart-wrenching. It was, gut-wrenching, right? No American should have to live through that. And that's a very small sampling, because you've got to take the entire body of victims that are there and distill that down into a very small number that can actually sit there for that committee hearing. And ultimately, there's a lot of people in Charlotte that don't feel safe. I mean, crime impacts 46 out of 1,000 Charlotteans every single year. And let me put this in perspective for you, right? On Tuesday, the day after these hearings down in Charlotte, somebody sent me a video of a couple hoodlums walking down a street in Steel Creek and opening fire on another home. This is Steel Creek. This is a super safe neighborhood, traditionally, historically, in Charlotte. And probably 30 rounds of gunfire between the assailants that were there, just shooting randomly. Now, when you look at the statistics, right, that those who are actually impacted by that crime, those 46 out of 1,000, are only that family that's in that one home. But what about the rest of the neighborhood that got 30 gunshots in their front yards at 1 o'clock in the morning, those people aren't counted. And so the overall experience of people in Charlotte is that they don't feel safe. And I know this because I lived there for a time, but they're reaching out to me on a daily basis and they're saying, Pat, I know you don't represent us, but I know that you've got a security background. Can you please help us solve this problem? And look, I want to give credit where credit is due. There has been a bipartisan effort, Republicans and Democrats and independents in Charlotte, to come together and start solving these problems after the murder of Irina Zarutska brought a national spotlight to Charlotte's problems. But that being said, ultimately, elected officials are responsible to their voters. And the people of Charlotte don't feel safe. What bringing the National Guard in can do is actually free up the CMPD to do what they do best, which is arrest bad people and, for heaven's sakes, keep them in jail. I mean, that's really what we have learned, is that we've got to put people that have committed crimes, we have to put them in jail. There have to be consequences. We cannot release them on their own recognizance. We cannot release them without bail. Those things just perpetuate more crime and more violent crime. And I know, as a special operator, look, if you want to make a place safer, go after the top 100 people and figure out a way to put them away, right? Figure out a way to put those people behind bars, and Charlotte will be a safer place in 3 days. The National Guard can allow the CMPD to go do that because they're just holding ground, having a presence, being nice to people, providing people, that extra surety that nothing's going to happen to them because, you see a guy over there and a guy over there. I think it would do wonders to give Charlotte a jump start to getting over the hill on this problem. And we should consider it.
Just two last questions on this front. We hear the stats where violent crime is down, and I think Charlotte and some of these other big cities. But you're right, the juxtaposition is if people don't feel safe. That's a very real thing, too. Is it that much worse now, do you think, or is it just that much more out there? Like, how do we kind of put those two separate things together to try to move together on these issues?
I think, to be as honest as I possibly can, Tim, I think it's growing pains, right? I mean, it's not that we have, and we have had, consistent manning problems within the CMPD. We're always several hundred officers short. Can't seem to get up over that hump. We've had a really tragic, in my mind, philosophy that we can just be nice to criminals and they won't do criminal things again. And that's just not true, right? So we've got a fundamentally flawed thought philosophy there. But beyond that, look, North Carolina is growing, and it's growing because overall, it's been a really, really great place to live. But with that growth comes challenges. And if we don't rise to meet the challenges of the occasion, those that seek to undermine the public trust, that seek to work against law and order in our societies will take advantage of it. And that's exactly what they're doing. Now, I would argue that we've let them do that. And part of that is a growing pain from the perspective of elected officials that have not had their eye on the ball here. But in many instances, they don't have another reference in their lives, right? Like, I've lived all across the country with my military service. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, I watched California go from Reagan country to an absolute liberal cesspool. And so from that perspective, in a lot of ways, our cities in North Carolina are just 20 years behind California cities. And so I've had the ability to kind of see North Carolina's future a little bit. It might be a little bit more on the ball than others around here, which is why I'm just using some of that experience to say, hey, we do not need Charlotte turning into San Francisco. We've got some very poignant decisions that we have to make in a timely fashion. And if we all make them together, we're going to like the North Carolina that we hand over to our kids. If we don't, we are really not going to like it. We're going to suffer the consequences of it. We're at that inflection point right now. And so everybody just needs to work together to not play politics and do the right thing. That's why I genuinely do believe that we should work towards that cooperation from the local, state, and federal level. Use the resources that we have at all three levels to make North Carolina a better place.
So how far do you think that can and should go, though, long term here? Because I remember going to Cancun, Mexico first in college, and then later in life too, and seeing the military trucks down with the huge guns, and it was a little kind of unnerving, to be honest with you, in some ways. And we're seeing some of that, the militarization, some people are calling it, in some of these big cities. How long is too long with that, do you think? I mean, we don't get to the point where that's not happening for long periods of time, right?
Yeah, I don't think that we want that happening for long periods of time. I think that's got a very corrosive effect, the imagery of that, towards the safe and free society that we've always enjoyed, growing up. Tim, I enjoyed that. You enjoyed that. Our kids are growing up in a very different world. But I do think it's incumbent upon local municipalities and states to actually come together and solve these problems in a real demonstrable way. Like my concern right now is that the second that the spotlight of Irina Zarutska and Logan Federico and Mary Collins leaves from national attention, that we have politicians kind of go back to business as usual because they don't really care about law and order in society. We do have a significant portion of the Democratic Party that has historically wanted to defund the police. Just 2 years ago, they didn't want to buy the CMPD ammunition for the year, right? Like these are very real policy positions that the other side has taken. And so I want to make sure that we've got lasting solutions that can really only happen at the local and the state levels. The long-term solution is not from the federal government.
All right, two last quick fun questions because this has been pretty heavy into this conversation here. You said you're 6'7". Not too many people are 6'7". Have you always loved being tall? And what's the biggest problem with being 6'7", or the greatest thing?
Well, it's a double-edged sword because although you get to kind of see over the crowd and everybody gets to
you can't
turn to
hide
you and ask how's the weather up there. You do hit your head on a lot of things, like getting into vehicles, school buses, airplanes. I had a really hard time jumping out of a lot of aircraft when I was in the Special Forces because the door just was not made my size. And so oftentimes on a parachute jump, I'd end up, scraping along the side of the aircraft going bing, bang, boom, because I couldn't get out far enough because of my height. And so, it catches up with you, but overall, 9 times out of 10, it's a great advantage to be tall. And I've never wished to be shorter.
Okay. All right. And one last, tell us something we don't know about you. I mean, what kind of, do you like certain kind of music, or is there something, well, how do you unwind? Tell us something we don't know about you.
I like to work with my hands. I've always loved manufacturing things. One of the projects that's consuming me right now is I'm actually building about 100-yard long concrete path from my house down to my dock, and I'm doing it all with Quikrete. So I'm about 800 bags of Quikrete in right now.
Whew.
And I'm only about probably 30% of the way done, hand schlepping each of those bags to where it needs to go and mixing it. But I love that type of work. It's good for the soul. It connects you to where I came from. At the end of the day, I didn't grow up wealthy. I still don't pay people to do a lot of things that I could do myself. I think that's a very important thought perspective for our country moving forward. It's something I want to instill in my kids, is the ability to pull their own weight. And so maybe some of that discipline and some of those things that you talked about, me forcing my kids to do, I'm probably not being as honest as I could be. Catch me on a day where we're doing concrete work and you'll see my kids out there helping my wife and I. So they probably don't love it.
Well, if the government stays shut down, you might finish that this week. So
no comment, Tim.
Yeah. Smart. Congressman, thank you so much for your time. It's good to see you, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Y'all take care.
If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, check out the Tying It Together YouTube channel in the description. Hit subscribe and let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.